Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of CAD Lessons. Today, as ever, I am joined by Dom, Dick, and Tom. Say hello, chaps.
Hello, hello. How are you all
Hello.
doing?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Tom. I'm doing some CAD today and looking forward to going through this session.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. So today we thought we would start with our kind of little roundup on what Dick has been up to over the past week. So, Dick, hello. How are you? What's been going on in your world?
Hello, everybody. I'm very good. I unfurloughed for 2 whole days, did a little job with an agency for a pharmaceutical company. Such a weird. So 2 microphones, 2 loudspeakers, 12 laptops. This is just an insane world. And just so many screens, I couldn't take in the visual amount of information that was going on. But it all went very well and very smoothly. Clients very happy, and hopefully we'll do some more of them.
Cool. So you did a show. You did an actual real show in real life. And so how did it work with social distancing? Were you all together in one space or in different places?
So we had sort of production on one floor, 2 sound engineers in another area, and the video people in a third area. And I was playing with mirroring 2 desks so that if the company had 2 internet connections, so that if one internet connection fell over, both desks were receiving everything, and they were both synchronized with each other, so that you just had more faders to push. But we got away. We got away with no internet falling over at all. So. So we were very nicely sort of 5-7 meters apart with lots and lots of Cat5 cable.
Gosh, very good. How about in your CAD world? Did you get any chance to spend any time on CAD over the past week or so, working, between Array Calc and that whole thing? How did you get on?
Very little. I did a little test. Training sort of thing for myself of starting with a venue, and I would show it, but I'm having computer issues and sound conflicts all over the place trying out a new bit of software. So that computer is sitting there feeling very sorry for itself. But I tried importing a PDF, taking the measurements that the venue declared, and then building a set, chairs and what have you. And maybe I'll show it next week just as a little. But it's all in 3D and it kind of works. Yeah.
Amazing. Very, very good. I'm excited to see that next week. How about you, Dom? What have you been up to? And Dom, you're going to start us off today, aren't you, by showing us a little bit of...
Yeah. Let's do this. I received... screen to do that. Hopefully this will fire some sharing up.
Yep, that's incoming right now. Here it comes. There we go.
Here it comes. Cool. Yeah, I found this in the week, and it goes back to conversations that Tom talked about, and we've all talked about why 2D and 3D and why sections and understanding your plans. And I hope you can see this. It got built exactly like a section.
That is exactly what was on the drawing. No kidding.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It happens in real world. Yeah. I'm not sure which part of the world that was in, but all good.
So what are we talking about
this week? About sections. I'm going to talk a bit about sections. I think Tom's also going to talk about sections in a slightly different way. So we showed a couple of weeks ago with Dick's drawing of how I managed to show his information in sections, so we could see where the loudspeakers were going, where they were sitting underneath balconies and sightlines. And I thought I'd show in Vectorworks how we deal with that and what is possible. So it's back to the theatre I built before, and everything is inside it. So in Vectorworks, we have something called Clip Cube, and Clip Cube allows us to cut through a drawing, and you can do it in any plane. You can top downwards, and it's very useful for when you're actually working in 3D and you want to see something. You can just click yourself in. But one of its most fantastic features is I can take a face. We can go from there. We can look at this section point, which could be the center line. I've actually just come off the center line to catch this piece of the set on the stage. But when we've got the clip cube, I can ask it to section this face. So if it selects a face, you right click on it and it creates a section viewport. We all get all sorts of choices at that point in time. It's going to call it section 2 because it's looking at a sheet I called lefts. And I actually put something on earlier just to test it and deleted it. And we can give it a title. So we'll call it section 2A or something like that. We can choose a scale for it. So we'll say 1 to 100. We want to put it on there. And then pretty much everything else we leave as is. You can choose classes and layers, what's visible within it. So I'm going to click OK, and hopefully it's not going to take too long to render this out. What it's now going to do is cut this section. You'll watch with me in the bottom right-hand corner of my screen. It's going to cut this section and put it onto the sheet for me, hopefully, if I was talking and concentrating at the same time. It gives you an idea.
You did very, very well there of
Tom,
trying to explain it at the same time as driving the CAD machine.
Yeah. And then there we go. And it's done it. So we're now looking through that section. And we can obviously see where the cameras are. We can see where Dick's beautiful speakers are. We can see our bit of set. And a general rule, we haven't talked about rules very much recently in CAD, but a general rule, and I'm pretty sure Tom will agree, is that a lot of people I work for, they ask us to annotate, so details, measurements and stuff like that within the paper space, within this layout space. And in AutoCAD, you would just come and draw around this viewport. In Vectorworks, it's slightly different. We annotate within the viewport. So I double-clicked on the viewport, and we get annotations, crop, section in place, and design layer we can change. The crop is, as it actually sounds, I can cut out a bit of this section, but in this instant, we're interested in annotations. And the one I briefly talked about before was sight lines from the upper balcony. So we just kind of grab a line and we come out of, say, somebody actually sitting in this chair slightly above it. And we come down, we're looking at this lip here, what they would not see over the heads of somebody else. And if we kind of cut that down to the forestage, so there's the edge of the orchestra pit, so the edge of the stage is just back here, and we dropped a line there, we can already see that this balcony is clipping that view. And I know it's a very theatrical way of looking at things, but it's something we always have to consider. So I then select the line again, and we move the line back, and we can see at what point, if I bring the screen down, at what point we wouldn't be clipping if we wanted to use that upper row. And it's going to be a good couple of meters back on the stage. You would see their toes from the back of it. Another interesting line of just sectioning. If we ended up
just on that, sorry. So you're just kind of saying that if you're going to put a camera up there on the back row, just in terms of whether you'd be able to get a sort of full, whether you'd need to kind of do a kind of mid-chest shot, you couldn't necessarily get down to their feet if they were, you couldn't do a kind of full height
you couldn't get
shot.
down to their feet. You couldn't come onto the orchestra pit. And more importantly, the punter sitting up there, we can jack the camera up. The poor person sitting in the seat, which we can't move, wouldn't see something far downstage.
No. Cool.
And
obviously, if it's just
standard
a head or a face, then that's going to be up kind of above 6 foot. So maybe it kind of is all right again, I suppose. But if it was,
you'd much
if you were
get
doing
half
anything
body,
down to the floor. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and
nice.
And it's exactly the same. Again, very theatrical. If we come to the top of the pros and we kind of come through, so that'd be the top of the pros. What would be missing if people were flying stuff in above the pros line? At what point they would actually see it? So this is all useful stuff for setting lighting bars, setting speaker arrays. So we can see Dick's actual center speaker array here. He's sitting just above the pros line, so we know we're clear, and that's all good. Another classic one would be if we were a corporate going into a theatre, which is not unheard of, and we wanted to set up a projector somewhere around here.
Done many shows that way.
What we're actually looking here is Dick's speaker halfway through. So here's a permanent house speaker, and that's actually limiting how high we can actually fly that screen on stage. There's our first limit point. So I would suggest if we were talking in early production, we actually bring the projector up to the mid balcony, and we did exactly the same thing here. And then we get the ability to go much higher within the space, so you can fly the screen higher, and people can walk underneath it, and we're not shadowing, etc., etc. So this is kind of showing the importance of sections, and from my point of view, what a section can do in 3D, because that's just taken out a 3D model. Once we've got this model built, we can very easily move stuff around and find what works and what doesn't work for us. And it's that first initial data of getting it in there, and then we can very easily edit. I'll just quickly go show one more thing that AutoCAD users don't have. But if I then actually draw this line, or draw a line in here of anywhere, when I come out, that line of sectional annotation actually stays with the viewport. So when I move the viewport, I just pick the viewport up and move it, it goes with it. And in AutoCAD, that doesn't happen. You have to pick up all your annotation around it and make sure it moves with. So it's just a nice little thing that Vectorworks does, trying to make life easier.
So is there an option within AutoCAD to do this section through? I'm thinking of the Athens arena that you shared with me, of being able to, yes, fine, you can see it from left, right, top, what have you, but you can't cut through the middle, or I don't know how to cut through the middle.
You can do, yeah. Let Tom speak.
Cool. Go for it, Tom.
I suppose the first thing to say is the description that Dom has very clearly gone through. It looks at a glance a lot easier than doing the same thing in AutoCAD. But so the two tools that I would use to do something similar to this is the 3D clip, which seems like very, very similar, Dom, to what you did in the model space. Yeah. But then to produce this, you couldn't do such a nice drawing as Dom did with 3D clip. So you would use view base, which is the Revit style layout drawing. So you'd have to do a plan of the space. Then you use the section command to cut through it, and that's how you produce a drawing. So that's why I'd describe that. It seems that the steps that Dom went through is much easier to produce a clear drawing in Vectorworks, in my opinion, at this stage.
It's something that I've done both, and the sectioning in AutoCAD it would have taken longer to cut through that in AutoCAD than it did in Vectorworks. And yeah, I use the section command, and it lays it out separately within the model space, and then you make your viewports from that. So you think, to answer your question, it's possible.
And do you presumably then you determine the two lines at either end of the section that you want, and do it that way? Do you?
Yeah, so I'm wondering whether I've got something I can bring up. Dom, could you just talk for a moment and see?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So yeah, in Athens and in all the models I've done where we've 3D'd, you draw a line through. So think back to original when you still draw on paper. You used to have your plan and used to project up on your plan with rulers, and then you'd start marking up. That's exactly what you're saying. You cut a line in 2D through what you want, and then you run a section command and it projects the slice up from there looking through the model, which is why it takes a little bit longer in AutoCAD, I think. And maybe Tom has got something for us.
So I've got a screen which hopefully you'll be able to see, and I think Dick, you might have seen this before. It's your drawing, but essentially I have drawn, unfortunately I couldn't bring up a venue very quickly, but I've drawn something in 3D. So I've got to model space, I've done shift middle wheel to see that this is in a model space, it's in 3D. And in AutoCAD, if you draw something in 3D solid, which is often the way you draw in AutoCAD, not the only way, but often the way you can draw in AutoCAD, you can use something called view base to do the layout. So if I were to temporarily delete all this information in layout space, I go to the layout tab, I do base from model space. In my hand is front elevation of this element. I press enter. No, I don't, because that deletes it. I click and then I press enter, and then I've got a plan and an isometric view. And so this is where, in my opinion, it seems like it's a lot easier in Vectorworks, because to do the section, I'll then use the section command here in the chosen location, which is in this circumstance here. I let it think about it, and I pull it down, and I press enter, and it now has done a section through. So, and the reason you can see that it's a section through is because there's the person's arm is missing. And you can see the internal construction of this element here in comparison to the front elevation, which is my logo on a wall. So this is my opinion of how you do something similar to Vectorworks, Dom. I don't know if you agree or whether you think that's something slightly different.
No, it's getting to the same point. So you can actually give that information. You could have easily cut through a whole building at that point in time to see the section lines.
And Dom, I don't know if you could explain what Vectorworks is doing, but can I just quickly explain what I believe that AutoCAD is doing in this circumstance? So in model space, I have a 3D drawing, which is useful to tell a story, which is why we try and do nice clear drawings to tell a story, which I think we've discussed in the past, but not necessarily useful for graphic, for example, if you want to import it into Illustrator, for example, which is done sometimes. So what this is doing is the view-based command is doing a 2D representation of a 3D model. So as a consequence, what we're looking at now is 4 views, which we know is a 3D drawing, but it's represented in 2D. So what you can do is do export layout. So you type in export layout in the command line, and you're going to, in this circumstance, I'm going to save it on the desktop. But what it's going to do is an export of this viewport into a new drawing. It says, would you like to open the drawing? I say yes, and I do zoom extents. And in model space, I now have my what was a 3D drawing totally 2D, which I find incredibly useful. And Dom, could you explain in Vectorworks is when you're using the section command, is it a live section through the 3D model, or is it a 2D representation of it as it's going along?
It's a live section because it's live because it's connected. So whatever, if I go in and edit something within the 3D model, I just come over here, click update, and it will update my section at that point in time. So
sorry, it does the same in AutoCAD. So I could go into here and delete this and go back to model space. But I don't know if there's something similar to the export layout in Vectorworks, but this is one tool I find really useful because it's a totally accurate drawing, but it's in totally. So if I go to front elevation, it's totally 2D.
Yeah, flat. It's been flattened. Yeah, it's a flattened drawing, isn't it?
So it's lightweight.
It's not something actually ever done in Vectorworks, to be fair. No, it's not actually a tool I use to flatten. If I have to flatten a drawing, I tend to flatten it. But it's to export beyond is not something I normally have to do to go to workshops, because yours is a fantastic ability to send a graphics company or something like that.
Because it's probably maybe, Dom, it's the limitations, the negative limitations that AutoCAD has. So the section command you were showing us in model space, you technically have something vaguely similar to that in AutoCAD, but just not. I don't think it's as powerful as Vectorworks. So this is my only way of knowing that through that section line there is what it actually looks like in 2D. So maybe it's probably much easier in Vectorworks, and this is my opinion of one way that you can get around it, and I suppose how you can get around it in AutoCAD.
And it's exactly the same way I would fiddle my way around it in AutoCAD. So
Yeah, and I guess the key thing there really is to say that the different software do achieve things in different ways, and I guess there's some benefits to either route, but sometimes it's a little bit about what you know. I mean, the speed at which we've seen Tom do some of his demos is absolutely incredible. But it does look as though there are maybe in Vectorworks some workflows that are much, much quicker in the first place, which I think is quite interesting. Dick, have you found any elements in DraftSight that you haven't necessarily, anything you've not been able to do, or have you kind of found everything that you wanted to be able to do so far? Because I think that one's interesting, just because it's such a different price point, isn't it, compared to the other packages?
I think I've at the moment I haven't found anything. I'm slightly struggling, but I ran out of time with getting the Lisps to work, but it understood them and downloaded them, and was it definitely can do them. Though that really is a brain ache. But no, as far as I can see, everything so far has been, and like I say, so many of the commands, even if they're not exactly the same, it seems to recognize and turn them into the command that it should be for DraftSight. But the attributes, that all worked.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's one of those things, like we often, as I guess freelancers, work across different agencies. So sometimes we get asked, but we go to a new agency and they say, "Oh, do you do AutoCAD or Vectorworks?" As if it would be a problem if you weren't doing the right one. Do you see what I mean? But I think really what we're saying is that it doesn't matter too much which one you work in, because actually it's about you being able to solve these problems and output a PDF often at the end of the day for someone else to then make use of. So it's interesting. I often get asked, like, which is better, or do you wish you did both, and all that sort of thing. And it's like, well, Dom has taken the effort to make sure he can do both. And yes, there are things that are faster for solving certain types of problems, but I'm sure there are other things that that Tom can do faster. I think you kind of learn the software.
Absolutely, yeah, it is. And I jump backs and forwards. There's some things, some tasks, I'll jump back to AutoCAD and do something, and then come back to Vectorworks and carry on. Vectorworks does feel quicker at sectioning. I'll just very quickly, to answer Dick's question, show you a section of Oakland Arena. I hope it'll come through.
Got it?
Yeah. You got everything. That's everything in one go, Dick. So that's set, screened, rigging, building, all there. That would have taken absolutely ages in AutoCAD to cut through. It took a couple of minutes in Vectorworks. It did make all my fans spin on the computer. But yeah, but it's exactly the same thing. So this between theatre and the arena, that there's a cross section through the centre line, and there's each way, X and Y, so people can see where stuff is. It gives a graphical representation.
So this is one that I've played with, and I think I showed you briefly a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, of turning it into D&B's array calc, which is what they use as a sound prediction tool. And it took me about 2 hours to map that venue into array calc, but I'm trying to use it to tease D&B to get them interested, and maybe other sound engineers interested, so that we can try and build up a point scan of venues, so that rock and roll touring technicians who daily changing venues, if all of the venue plans are there, they can just import them into, whether it be L Acoustics or D&B, whoever's prediction software, and actually get an accurate plan straight away, and let the computer do the thinking of where the array should go and how they should be hung. And it's something that is so easy once you've got an accurate plan.
It is amazing, really, to think that we spend such a lot of our lives trying to fix the sort of ropey venue plans that we get given. It is incredible the amount of time I've spent tracing a PDF, for example, and trying to guess as to whether it's right or not, and then going and doing a recce and checking a couple of walls or checking a couple of doors, or in some cases having to measure up a lot of the room manually to then check back against the PDF I was given, and then, oh look, the PDF was insanely miles and miles out. In this day and age, we shouldn't really be working that way, right?
No, and it's as Tom says, it's the biggest part of the cost differential within drawing is how good is that initial data. And if you've got to go back and spend a day checking it and redrawing it, it's crazy, when we know we can easily generate accurate data very, very quickly. It's not a hard thing to do. So.
No, exactly.
And
wonderful.
Particularly in the sound world, now line arrays, each loudspeaker has its own amplifier channel with its own little bit of EQ, to try and make the system tech's job easier, of having almost absolutely even coverage all the way through the venue. And the more accurate the plan is, the more the predictive software can work out those things in advance. And then when you get into things like Soundscape, which I did a McLaren job using, where you move sound in full 3D, it's beautiful, but it needs really, really accurate measurements, because all of the imaging is millisecond accurate. So it is down to centimeters, and your plans are even more accurate than that.
Try to be. Try to be. But to me, the whole interest is that what we're talking about here, and Tom and I are very production based, and I have a bit of a lighting head, and Tom has a construction head as well. is how this goes out to other people, and we can see it through you, Dick. And I'd love to know from people watching how else our plans go on, and what else we can achieve, and how we can draw better, more accurate plans that they then can use it for mapping or whatever. So people
And
out there want to contact us.
As a teaser, next week we're going to have a video engineer join us, and he's going to talk about some of the more prosaic bits, but he's also going to talk about some of the more interesting projection mapping and the BST festival. He's going to show some nice images of what the graphics, what the visuals actually look like with trees and PA where they should be, and presenter views, so that when a presenter walks on stage, they can see where the comfort monitors are, whether they're actually going to work with the stage at that height, and with a lectern and where it's going to be, all of those kind of things. So we finally found a video engineer who's prepared to stick their head above the parapet and have a chat with the big boys.
Very good, Dick. Well, I look forward to that one next week for sure. Tom, how are you doing? What have you got for us this week?
I'm going to talk about sections as well. It's much, much more basic than what Dom's amazing information was, but potentially helpful as well, just on a small scale. So I think a few weeks ago we were talking about how you can have different elements of text or dimensions within a block. A block is generally an item which is repeated many times in a drawing. In this circumstance, we're going to think about a block that can have change elements on it, but still have it named as the same block. So in this circumstance, I'm looking at a person sat on a chair, which is, this block is a person 79 seated, so it doesn't mean anything to us at this stage. But what this is a steel deck, a 4 foot deep or 1220 deep steel deck in section with scaffolding legs in the corners. In this circumstance, it's 250 millimeters high. So this is my opinion on this drawing. That's the minimum increments that I desire for this steel deck. So I want this steel deck to be 250 millimeters high. And what I can do, I can move this across by 1220. I can then figure out, I moved it the wrong measurement, so I'm going to move it a different measurement. I'm going to move it across by an arbitrary measurement. I'm going to stretch it up. I don't know what measurement to stretch it up by. Let's do 250 millimeters. Or we can turn it into a block and make it a bit more user-friendly. So I'm going to do a block, and I'm going to do deck section 1. I'm going to do a base point to the top of the deck. And I'm going to include everything, including this person sat down. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go and edit this block. So block editor. On the left-hand side, you have parameters or actions in the annotation of this block. So what I would like to do in this circumstance, I would like the block to give us information about the height it is off the ground. And I would like to have this steel deck legs to change height on my command, rather than having to have multiple different blocks of decks at different heights. So I'm going to do a linear dimension of this height. And what this is telling me is all it is, we're going to use it as a command in a moment. So you think, well, why does it not have any information in it? All it is telling it is the fact that it's point 1 and point 2 is a certain distance apart. In this circumstance, I know it's 250 millimeters, but we can edit it in there later on. We want to add an action to that dimension. So I'd like to use the stretch command. I'm going to select the parameter that I choose to change. I press enter. I'd like to select the location that I'm going to pull from. So in this circumstance, it's this height. I apologize. I'm going to press escape. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do the stretch command, press enter. I'm going to select the point here, and I'm going to select everything I desire to stretch. And within that block, everything is going to be stretched. I'm going to press enter. And what I'm going to do is close this block. So save that. So now I have the insertion point of this, so I can drag this to wherever I desire, but I also have an up arrow. and this up arrow is telling us it's 251.97 millimeters, which is a bit unfortunate. So I've done the wrong measurement. But what I can do, I can change the height. I am going to undo that. So what you can see is that height will change to anything you desire. And there's any height at all, and you can put a height in of 800 millimeters here. But I would like to make it a bit more user-friendly. So I'm going to go to Block Editor. I'm going to click once on the distance command. In the right-hand side in the properties, I'd like to do an increment of something. So in this circumstance, I'm going to increment to 50 millimeters and a minimum distance of 250 millimeters. I'm going to close this block and save that.
And Tom, just to jump in there, that's because you know that those tend to be for the scaffolding legs. Those tend to be the increments that are available from the rental companies. But the production manager might be working with a particular rental company that might only have 300 mil legs, or there might be 300 and 600, 900, or whatever it happens to be.
You're entirely right. So in hindsight, potentially, maybe I should have done it as 150 millimeter increments, which is 6 inches, Dave, because I think I would agree with you entirely. But yeah, in this circumstance, I've done 50 millimeters, and you can see it will snap to 50 millimeters. I apologize for making a mistake in these to start with by setting it as 251 millimeters rather than 250, which is a bit of a shame, but never mind. So therefore, it's always
the point is there.
which is a bit annoying. But so the reason I would do this is to have a discussion with Dave or another production manager, and to do a task which can be done in many different ways. But in my opinion, it's the most efficient way I personally can figure out how to do it. So I'm going to press Escape and move over to something I've done already. So what this is one opinion of a section of a totally made up venue. On the left hand side, I have a stage with a prompt screen with a flat behind it. I have 3 rows of chairs on the ground, and then I have these different blocks going up. So the reason I selected all 4 is in the right hand side you might see block reference in brackets 4. So there's 4 elements which are all blocks, and the most important thing is where under miscellaneous, the name is one name. In comparison to when you select, we'll press Escape now, 2 blocks which have 2 different names. So it's 2 blocks, but the name varies. So just to clarify the fact that what this is 1 block with a distance added to it. And as a consequence, so rather than, because you can definitely do it with 1 block, so you can explode it, and I can do a block here, and I could copy that again, or I could explode that, etc., etc. But what this is it's quite a useful tool to have an open discussion that Dave says, well, I have no idea why you set it at 500 millimeters. I can only do 550 millimeter legs. So you can quickly set that. And this one, it has to be lower. For the third row on the raised roster has to be lower because of the headroom above it. Or this one, it needs to be 1.5 meters because there's going to be a camera next to this person or whatever. So it's quite a useful tool to go through different steps. And I'm going to undo those for a moment. And the reason that it's quite useful is in this circumstance, this is probably maybe more cost effective because you might need to purchase less treads. So for example, in this circumstance, you'd have to buy a tread for each step. In this circumstance, we're going to save a bit of money. So we're going to have 1 tread for here and 1 tread here, but we just need to have an opinion. So Dom earlier was talking about sections or sight lines through the section. I'm going to use the ray command, which is a line that goes from a point to an infinite point in the distance. But in this circumstance, I'm going to pass it by. So I've selected the eye of this person on the stage, and I've selected the hair of this person in the 5th row or so. And you can see that in this circumstance, the presenter can see the head of the 6th row, I think that is. But at the same time, we just need to say, can the presenter see the prompt screen? Which is fine. But the client says, why is the stage not 1.5 meters off the ground? A bit of an extreme situation, but you realize in this circumstance, the prompt screen can't be seen. So therefore you say, oh, that's fine. Let's move the prompt screen to there. But then the prompt screen is too close to this first row of seats. So they need to move that back, and then the venue is too small. So it's just quite a useful tool to quickly play around with what's available. So that's how
I think that's absolutely fantastic.
So,
I guess in
different
terms of the
about
way
the Ray
that
tool?
Sorry, Dick. Go on.
So what's different about the Ray tool than just an ordinary line? Is there something?
So in AutoCAD, there's a line which is a straight line, and if I do the line command, I do a horizontal and a vertical. That horizontal is not joined to the vertical. I can use a polyline command, which is I'm going horizontally and I go vertically, and I press enter, and those two lines are joined together. The Ray command has a starting point, but it does not have an end point. So it could go hundreds and hundreds of meters, and you'll never ever find the distance. There's an infinite length to it. So, for example, that's why I find incredibly useful for a section command. A sight line. So the Ray tool has a starting point, in this circumstance, somebody's eye, and the intersection of the eye in this circumstance is the top of the prompt screen. So we can prove that presenter can see the toes of the first row of the seats, if that's if that's useful in that circumstance. Maybe it's a shoe show, so they want to look at people's shoes. So we have a line, we have a polyline, or we have a Ray. There's also another tool.
That Ray command is amazing. It's absolutely brilliant. I've just been scaling my line all the time. So I've just been clicking the 2 points, typing scale, going back to the start, and then just going 5 times 5 or whatever to scale it through. Whereas that Ray just shoots straight onto infinity. Which is
that's another perfect way of doing it, Dave. That's another way.
No, Ray is better. I love it. I've learned something new.
So another way is if you use a polyline, you just put a circle to extend it to something, and use the extend tool to extend to that line. That's another way of doing it. So a Ray is 1 point to an infinite point in the distance. Another one, which is often I would use all the time in comparison. Ray is very specific. I'd use for a sight line, but a construction line or an X line is the same idea, but what you're doing is you've selected the center point, and you have a line which is infinite in left and right. But I use it more if I use so my shortcut is XL for X line. I use, rather than placing it, I'd use a horizontal or a vertical. So H for horizontal, and you've got a horizontal line which is infinite left and right. And then you can do another one, which is a vertical one, and then just trim to it. So that's how I'd often use a construction line.
I find X lines hugely useful when I'm in CAD. I think it's because I'm really old and I started on paper, and it's like having construction lines on paper, and it allows you to start blocking stuff out really quickly and easily. I think we talked about it really early on about if you're in a room, just putting file lanes down, seeing restrictions really quickly before you do anything else. And X line is really useful tool for everybody to get their heads around. And again, dynamic blocks, as you showed the rostra, dynamic blocks, I think for workflow, I know we keep talking about workflow, but if you can build blocks around like Tom did and keep that block and keep using it again and again and again, it's going to save you so much time.
And I guess that with those dynamic blocks in particular, being able to include some of those parameters sort of take you a step closer to some of the parametric modeling software. I suppose with Vectorworks, Dom, a lot of that stuff is then built into those original symbols, right? And those original objects, so you can actually start adjusting those straight away. But with the dynamic blocks in CAD, you're able to kind of take some of those a similar approach to some of that stuff by carefully building out your library. We just need somebody to own. We need CAD really to build out a production library of those dynamic blocks, don't we? In the same way that Vectorworks have done that for Vectorworks.
Yeah, and I think that's the success of Vectorworks. They have put that effort and time into Spotlight, and they bought it off a lot of people who have built it independently, and then they buy up the library. So but that's the power of it, is editing time at the end of it all. So.
Very good. Very good. Dick, do you have any questions on either of those things? We've kind of been talking about sections today. Dom doing some bits in Vectorworks in the way of displaying those sections, but then also obviously the dynamic blocks thing is really quite powerful in terms of the next step on from just a normal block.
Yes, so I mean, dynamic blocks has got to be interesting.
Come back again.
Yes, sorry. So the Rays and the construction line, do they exist do they print the same? Are they on the same layers, or are they just part of the model space?
As far as I'm aware, they print identically. But what you can't do, so if you were to draw a stage that's 10 meters by 10 meters and put a construction line through the center of it, when you zoom extent, it will only ever zoom extent to that 10 meter by 10 meter stage. It won't zoom extent to the whole construction line because there is no end to it.
Yeah, understood. No, that's good. Yeah.
And then so if you did a 10 meter by 10 meter rectangle square, put a horizontal line through it to the center line, and then you could trim that construction line to the front and the back, or the downstage and upstage of the stage, and then it turns back into a line or a polyline. So it's quite useful, and it can be used in so many different circumstances.
I tend to put them on, if I'm blocking stuff, I tend to put them on the next line layer, so I can have my working sitting there, then turn it off for publishing to a producer and go, there you are, this is where I think I am. And they go, oh, no, we'll do it differently. Turn them back on again, refiddle, and then, something. And as you've learned, you can just put them not down to print, just let them not to print as well.
Yeah.
So with layer control. They're a great tool to have in the background of your drawing to help you lay out and move stuff. So.
I mean, I think my attempts at drawing a venue from scratch. This is the kind of thing that you do realise, about an hour in, that actually there's so much easier ways of doing stuff. And I'm just going back. I watched lesson 1 again and still picked up new stuff. And it is just it's what you keep going back to, of the workflow. Of being methodical, because you just realise you make so many silly mistakes unless you do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite impressed, Dick, that you managed to find those. We seem to be really struggling. Those original 3 sessions exist purely on Facebook, and I did try to move them onto the YouTube channel so that everything was in the one place, but Facebook don't make it easy. You could only get an SD version, in which case you wouldn't be able to see any of the wonderful CAD work that you guys have been doing. But that's brilliant. Thank you very much for today. I think that was a really, really useful kind of next step on. There was quite some powerful tools that you kind of just snuck in there, and I think maybe we can revisit some of those in different ways as we kind of move forward. So, thank you very much for today. Say goodbye for now.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Thanks again. Bye bye.